Welcome back to episode 2, The Great Conversation. In this episode, we're talking about the tradition of the West. What is liberal education and why are we not receiving one? It took me like 16 tries to get that out. We're just going to go for it. Babe, take it away.
Okay, so the tradition of the West...
I'm going to drink.
Okay, go for it. We talked about this a little bit in episode 1, that the tradition of the West is embodied in the Great Conversation.
Sorry.
And the Great Conversation is the dialogue. It is this inquiry.
It is the back and forth, the true conversation that takes place.
Yes, and the back and forth happens through the written
books.
word.
Yep.
It happens, obviously, in conversation
Yep.
as the authors in past centuries have had conversation and then they've written down. And we've looked at every angle of every possible question that man could have. The purpose of life. Is God real?
Yep.
I mean, and this is why it's still relevant today. This is why it's not just leisure reading. It doesn't mean that because we're post-industrialization and we have obviously very different social issues of today. We don't have slaves anymore, etc. It's still relevant.
Yes.
And so the tradition of the West is going to continue. We are a part of it, whether we know it or not.
Well, let me add
let's
there.
Start knowing about
If we forget the tradition of the West, one of my favorite quotes, and there's many people who have said it, is those who forget history are bound to repeat it.
Right.
So if you throw away these books, better yet, if you just simply don't read them, you will, in essence, be where we were, which is not a place we want to be. So by reading these books, you look back, you reflect, and you move forward. Because where we're at right now, we're not having new, original, fantastic thoughts. People have had them before, and we should know what the greatest minds have thought about it so that we can build upon the shoulders of giants.
Right. Right. And as we learn through these books and we get perspective of time, because we are a vapor in time.
Yes.
And obviously 2,500 years, we can't even really comprehend that. To really stop and think how many people have lived, all the conversations that have happened that weren't even written down or that we have not taken the time to read, because these great books that are in this collection obviously are not every book that we are building our society upon that are relevant today. These are a foundation. These are a starting point. These are masterminds in the time that they wrote, and we really have to know what they had to say. And their thoughts are still infiltrated into our society, whether we know it or not. And so let's just know. Yeah.
And so that is the tradition of the West. Yeah. Now let's talk about what is...
Oh, but I do want to say real quick before we get to the tradition.
Yes.
Before we go past the tradition, I love this line that Hutchins, it was a few lines, but really encapsulated, is that the tradition of the West, as we choose to not be ignorant of it and we decide we're going to start a liberal education, it is not so that we can do something else. It's not a means to something. A liberal education, educating ourselves, growing our minds, is an end of itself. That we have grown as a human being, that we can live better lives, that we can be free men. Because when we're educated and we know how to ask questions and we know what to demand of our society and our government, then we are free and we are living excellent lives. And so that tradition is a huge reason to be a part of that tradition. Yeah,
and that's what reading these books envelops you into, is that tradition. The tradition of being a free, as we said in the last episode, a free democratic citizen.
Yeah.
100%. So then what is a liberal education? And it's not a liberal arts education. I've been corrected a handful of times on that one.
Well, it is a liberal education, and we become liberal artists.
Liberal artists.
And we all are liberal artists. So a liberal education is the fact that we can read, we can write, we can speak, listen, understand, think, and then on top of that, there is matter, quantity, and motion, and we can reckon, measure, and manipulate. And we do all of this to be able to predict.
And manipulate is the one thing that confused me. Manipulate is really more of the refashioning or pulling together of different ideas so that we can create new thoughts.
Right. We use manipulate in
a negative connotation.
In society we do. So I obviously have been educated in the medical field, and so manipulate.
I have not.
Yeah. Anytime in science when we talk about manipulating, we talk about just changing things a little bit, changing either the matter itself or the conditions around that matter.
Okay.
And so when we manipulate, we know how to change the matter. We know how to either change it in our favor or not in our favor, or it could mean so many different things.
So in a sense, it's a scientific process. It's the process of discovery, of change, of alteration, so that you can get to a new place or a new understanding of something.
Right, so that we can, these are the three things. We want to be able to predict, we want to be able to produce, and exchange. as a human being in everyday life. I mean, just think about, I'm a woman, putting makeup on. I mean, it's like, this is such a silly example, but if I don't even understand the cause and effect of, okay, I'm going to put this product up on my face, and multiple things could happen when I put makeup on. My face could react. I could have a reaction to that product.
Yeah.
It could make me look more beautiful.
Well, the look you're going for.
It could make me look atrocious.
You shouldn't put lipstick under your eyes.
Right. And so that is
Unless
such
you're a
a
Comanche
simple...
war chief.
Yeah, and I mean, if we just think about children, when they're learning, we can watch them and understand this process a little bit more, that they at first do not understand cause and effect.
Yeah,
My
that's so true.
11-month-old does not understand that when he's up on a high chair, because he crawled up there, that if he steps too close to the edge, he could slip and fall, and then that would cause pain. He does not understand that cause and effect yet.
Yeah.
And so we think as adults, oh, well, of course I understand that. Well, you grew to understand that. Your mind, this is where we understand that we are all liberal artists.
Yes.
We all learn how to speak and read and write. Just how well do we do it?
How well
do we understand cause and effect?
And that's what Hutchins said. He says, everybody is a liberal artist, but how great of a liberal artist are you?
Are we going to be ignorant?
Or do you want to become?
Right. Or are we going to be excellent?
Yes. Ignorant or excellent.
Yeah. And so this is the liberal education. And so we stop and we think, okay, well, we kind of learn that every day. We learn cause and effect.
Yeah.
But how well are we learning it? How deep are we digging into cause and effect? Are we asking hard questions like, what is the purpose of life? And really learning how to manipulate and predict and understand, how can we understand what is the purpose of life? I mean, this is going to take so much conversation, 2,500 years of life asking this question.
Well, and the coolest thing is we're distilling 2,500 years of life down to, 60 volumes.
Right, and that's why it's a foundation.
That's pretty incredible when you think about it. And, one of the things that the book points out, or that, the intro points out here, is that often when I saw this, I was like, okay, great. Like, I don't just want to become, somebody who knows everything about just a little bit. A little bit about everything.
Yes,
Thank you.
We think we don't want to be
We think we don't want to. But it's okay to be a specialist in one area and then a generalist in others, because oftentimes the generalities inform the specialty. Mm-hmm. Because you'll come through, you'll get a breakthrough from one of these things that you're reading, and it'll apply to something you're doing in your specialty.
Right. And Hutchins himself doesn't really even use the word generality. I mean, he really believes, and I think all of the great thinkers of the past would think, we really need to know enough about each subject to really be able to talk in a very educated way about each topic. So you might be a physician, you might know a lot about science. That does not mean that if a philosopher walks in the room or a mathematician walks in the room, you should not be able to have a very educated conversation, asking questions, proposing your thoughts about something. Now, you might not be as good as that mathematician, but you should know enough. And this is why reading these books, all of them together that include so many different fields, is going to open up different parts of our mind and help us to think deeper.
And the fact that they build upon each other was the sole purpose of the collection of books. Because if they were, if they were very far-fetched between them and they didn't work together, then it wouldn't help build the full picture of a liberal education.
Right.
It would be just a random specialty here, a random specialty there. And that was my big concern and your big concern. So when reading the preface, we saw, okay, they assembled them for the sole purpose of the conversation that they created. Mm-hmm. And that's the important thing. That's why this volume creates a good foundation and is not just a bunch of random books out of the past 25 centuries.
Right. So that is the tradition and what a liberal education is. Yes. Now let's talk, especially into chapter 3, about what are we getting in school. When we go to grade school and we spend so much of our day year after year in grade school and then high school, and then we go to college and then we do, postdocs, etc. We're spending thousands of hours, years of our lives. What are we learning? And this is where Hutchins brings in the misinterpretation of Dewey.
Yes.
So Dewey obviously has quite a bit of following. Our educational system today is built a lot on what his misinterpreted thoughts were about what school should be,
Yeah.
not necessarily education. School turned more into, okay, let's talk about vocations. What jobs are there out there? And we think in our school system now, the teachers, the people that are building our school system, they say, we think that all of these students should be learning about jobs. And Dewey kind of had that idea, but it was more misinterpreted that he really just wanted to spark this interest in young people about different ways to earn an income, hoping that they would really take an interest and learn so much about their vocation, when in fact that's really not how it works, because in the school system it's not the best environment to be learning about the work field. You can't imitate it perfectly. Dewey really kind of missed that part.
The problem is that works best in a apprenticeship situation,
school,
and the issue with that is then you have to literally dive fully into a trade, whether it be, I think about Benjamin Franklin, one of my favorite founding fathers. He apprenticed as at a print shop, in essence. Then he learned about bookbinding, and then from there he learned about philosophy and politics, and he became an inventor. But he started somewhere. And so the issue that I see with the current educational system is they don't just start, it'd be like, it's a trouble, because if you just pointed at a child and said, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to be a teacher, that probably wouldn't work.
Right.
And so the whole idea is that they expose the children to a little bit of everything and then let the child pick.
Right.
The problem is the child isn't quite ready to pick.
Right.
I mean, you ask the average child, what do they want to be? They want to be a spaceman, or they want to be a firefighter, or they want to be a YouTuber now these days. Right. And so it's like an impractical test of the child's ability to select. Right. I mean, if you ask our child what he wants to eat every day, I mean, it's going to be apple juice and, what's
ice cream.
Ice cream,
But more than that, yeah. So as you
exactly.
as you move through life, so at first,
yep, you want apple juice and ice cream all the time.
So as you start out, you want to be a cowboy or an astronaut,
yeah.
And then we ignore that. The school systems just say, oh, that's so fun, your child wants to be a firefighter, etc. So we ignore it, and then they move into times where we actually need to take it seriously, and they still are kind of just shouting out what sounds fun, not that they really know a lot about it. And I mean, this is for me too. I'm not just pointing fingers.
Yeah, for sure.
We all just kind of say, well, that sounds fun, or that person looks like they make a lot of money.
Yeah.
I kind of want to do that without this actual skin in the game. What's it going to take? Where's the hardship coming? How many years is it going to take to be that? Is it actually enjoyable, or did I just think I liked it? And so we spend all this time just kind of switching
gears,
ideas of what we want to be,
wasting
time.
Rather than just reading the core fundamental books. And that's kind of what we've talked a lot about. It's like, and that's what Hutchins talked about. If these books were read from a younger age, you would have a stronger foundation of knowing truly what each of the industries of the world, whether it be math, science, politics, literature, what they actually are.
Right. And you'd be a more well-rounded person. And this whole idea of, okay, well, how about, and we're talking about, in developed United States of America specifically, where children are going to school and they have the opportunity.
They have the time
to have an education.
Yep.
These works could be truly available to most children. And so the fear is that, well, maybe we should teach our children first how to get a job, and then after they get a job, then we can spend time educating. And the problem with that is that, again, they don't really know what they want to do. We know, I was a nurse right out of college. You were kind of like, okay, what do I want? What do I do? How do I make money? And you don't have time to be spending on learning. And so really what Hutchins says is, let's just help people develop their minds where they are very capable human beings. And then there will be no fear of how am I going to make money. A very educated person will figure it out.
Yeah.
They will know how to embrace what is available in society.
Truly.
And present themselves in a way where they can speak, read, write. They can do it. They have a great foundation in all areas to be a great candidate for a specific job or profession.
Because the goal of school is learning.
Yeah.
And I loved what he kind of noted here, and I kind of expounded.
And that's why he talks about it, schooling versus true education.
Exactly. And so it seems school, K through 12, K-12 through postdoc, seems to have become a rite of passage or even work in and of itself. So the fact of schooling, when somebody goes to school, it's almost like, oh, I'm working, I'm in school. That's what it seems like these days. The problem is that at the end of all this time spent, many, if not most, are left completely unprepared to lead a good life as a contributing democratic citizen. So they finish school and then it's like, okay, somebody hand me a job. Rather than the education being in the great books and then in the trade, in the practice as an apprenticeship. And so the problem is school feels like work rather than actually working, like having a liberal education and then working and then finding what you want and then doing it and contributing.
Right.
It's so complicated. It's a kind of a mess.
Right. We're kind of a mess because we have, obviously in the 50s, the assembly line and men were working all the time.
Yep.
So there was not a lot of time for a liberal education.
Yeah, 100%.
And on top of that, they didn't really get that liberal education in school, and so they're working the assembly line, and there's not a lot that they're thinking about. They don't have all of these deep thoughts because they didn't really learn how to have those thoughts in school, and then they come home and their time off, they don't have a lot in their leisure time that they were doing. And so now let's fast forward to where we are today. We have so many machines that are robots today, and they have become, and this might be a controversial term, but slaves to us. All of these machines do the work for us. We don't have to do it anymore. So we have all of this leisure time.
Ooh, that leads to this quote
yes,
right here.
But what are we doing in that leisure time? Why aren't we using this leisure time to be like the Greeks, to have this amazing empire? And we'd be even better, like he says, because we don't have to have slaves. We have machines to do it instead of people.
We don't have to abuse the human race, which is a wicked and deplorable thing.
Right.
Let me read this. And I'll pull this up. If you're watching the video on YouTube, you can read along with me. If we are to take the assembly line as the characteristic feature of Western industry, we must regard industrialization as, at best, a mixed blessing. The monotony, impersonality, and uncreativeness of such work supply strong justification for the movement toward a steady reduction in the hours of labor. But what if the time that is gained for life off of the assembly line is wasted? As the business of earning a living has become easier and simpler, it has also become less interesting and significant, and all personal problems have become more perplexing. So this basically paints what I don't know about you, but what we often feel in our current society. We have automated ourselves to such an extent, but we have not replaced our leisure time with true, fruitful, liberal education.
So with this amazing industrialization of our world today, we have so many computers and machines that can do our jobs for us. We have so much more leisure time than we used to have in society. And so let's all come together and grow our minds, get out of this torpor of our minds. Numbness of our minds, and just really find more purpose to life as we grow our minds.
Yeah.
And Hutchins, we talked about this in the beginning of this episode, that all men and women, at least in the United States, should have the opportunity to have a liberal education. And if we're presented with that opportunity and we say no or choose to squander it and we choose to stay ignorant, then unfortunately we choose to give up really our freedom in political power or leisure time because we are ignorant and we can become dangerous citizens. We aren't that free man that is informed and can make decisions based off of the foundation of all time in the Western society.
Based on the foundation, not based on emotion, not based on opinion.
Right, or propaganda, what somebody else is telling us to believe.
Somebody else is telling you to believe or think or say.
Right.
You need to take 25 centuries, not homegirls 20 years or whatever, whoever you're learning from or homeboy.
It's coming from both sides. Like, we're not even like pointing at one side. We see it throughout all of our society that everyone is being told what that powerful person wants them to believe or that powerful organization or whatever it is.
And these books, as Hutchins points out, these books are not, and excuse me if you're not from America, these books are not a leftist thing or a right thing. These books are a culture thing. These books are Western civilization. So you'll read a book and you'll be like,
point of view.
I disagree with that book. This book sucks. You might think that about, who is this here? You might think that about Hippocrates. Hippocrates, you suck. But you know what? It doesn't matter. It's not about if Hippocrates sucks or Hippocrates is awesome. It's about the great conversation.
And
it's
I will say it does matter in the
matters
sense that
in what's right and wrong.
Right, and
truly.
I think the reader gets to determine that. We talked about there is
which is why there's no commentary.
Right, there's no commentary from the scholars that put these books together in this collection, because you as the reader, it's not just about reading these books, it's about reading them and then formulating your own opinion. This person was right. This is truth. They were correct. Okay, no, they were way off. I don't know what they were thinking, but they still shaped the world that we live in today. And I have to grapple with how I feel about this, how I'm going to react to this, how I'm going to respond to this in the day that I live in today. Because every idea that we're going to read in this book is somehow going to still be a part of our society today. We might not see the direct effects of it, but we are going to see some trickling of that idea and how it shaped us today.
And that will help us know where the idea came from and know what that person's actual agenda was when they wrote that. The problem with agreeing with an ideology and not knowing the source of the ideology is you don't know everything you're agreeing with.
Right.
You ought to.
And you also...
I ought to.
I think this is a perfect example of Animal Farm. We think, oh, that idea is so great, and then we see it played out in Animal Farm, and obviously I'm not going to explain everything here. You're going to read it yourself, and we're going to talk about it later on. But, okay, does it really look good when it's in play? Does that idea look good in play?
Because a lot of ideas look great on paper.
Sure.
But paper is not a human experience. The human experience is messy and dirty and full of, it's broken and full of sin and full of just ego and self-will. And so when you take an idea and put it into society, it gets warped rather quickly. It can get warped, or it can be great. But that's why reading these is so foundational.
Right. But even saying this is why an idea that someone has presented in Western civilization, even if in my opinion it was a terrible idea, I don't just get to say, burn that book, get rid of it, we're not going to have it in society to be read. And more than that, that is wrong to stop an idea in a conversation, because that is what shapes us. That is the dialogue. If that was that person's view of this stone, and I'm looking at it from this direction, and I have this perspective, and let's see how we can work together and make this dialogue continue.
So let's have a great conversation. Episode 2, thank you guys so much for being here with us. We'll see you guys on the next one.